Sarah Matthews stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Tomorrow would be the most important day of her life. After 3 years of dating, she was finally going to marry David Richardson, the man she believed was her soulmate. The white dress hanging beside her seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. Everything appeared perfect on the surface. The venue was booked at the elegant Rosewood Manor, flowers were arranged, and 200 guests would witness their union. Sarah had spent months planning every detail, from the vintage lace centerpieces to the chocolate fountain that David specifically requested. Her friends often joked that she was the most organized bride they had ever seen. David worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown. He was charming, successful, and treated Sarah like a princess during their courtship. He surprised her with weekend getaways, expensive jewelry, and romantic dinners at 5-star restaurants. Her parents adored him, especially her father, who appreciated David's ambitious nature and business acumen. Everyone said they made the perfect couple. But lately, something felt different. David had been working late more frequently, claiming important client meetings that stretched well into the evening. When Sarah called his office, his secretary would say he had already left, yet he wouldn't arrive home until midnight. His phone was constantly buzzing with messages that he quickly dismissed as work-related. When she asked about his day, his answers became vague and evasive. Sarah tried to push away the nagging doubts creeping into her mind. Wedding stress was normal, she told herself. David was probably just overwhelmed with work pressure and wedding preparations. She had invested too much emotionally and financially to let paranoid thoughts destroy her happiness. Her wedding dress cost $3,000, the venue deposit was non-refundable, and guests had already made travel arrangements. The previous evening, David had been particularly distant during dinner. He kept checking his phone under the table, thinking Sarah wouldn't notice. When she mentioned final wedding details, he seemed distracted and gave half-hearted responses. She suggested they spend a quiet evening together watching movies, but he claimed exhaustion and went to bed early. Sarah lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing and wondering when they had started feeling like strangers. Her best friend Jessica had voiced concerns weeks earlier during the bachelorette party. She mentioned seeing David at an upscale restaurant with an attractive brunette woman, but Sarah dismissed it as a business dinner. Jessica's worried expression suggested she wanted to say more, but Sarah quickly changed the subject. Now, lying in bed the night before her wedding, those concerns echoed in her mind like warning bells. Sarah decided she was overthinking everything. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of their new life together. David had proposed on a beautiful beach in Hawaii, getting down on one knee as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. He had tears in his eyes when he told her she was the only woman he could ever love. That moment felt completely genuine and filled with pure emotion. She reached for her phone to send David a sweet goodnight message, even though tradition suggested they shouldn't communicate before the wedding. As she typed, a notification popped up from an unknown number. The message was clearly intended for David, but it had been sent to her phone by mistake. The sender had mixed up their contact information. The message read, "Can't wait to see you after this whole wedding charade is over tomorrow. Once you get the inheritance money from marrying her, we can finally be together like we planned. Delete. This message immediately. Love you forever, Miranda." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the words again and again. The room started spinning, and she felt like she couldn't breathe properly. The pearl necklace suddenly felt like it was choking her. Everything she believed about David, their relationship, and their future together crumbled in an instant. The man she loved was marrying her for money, and he had been having an affair with someone named Miranda. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the message in disbelief. Her grandmother's inheritance trust fund would become accessible once she married, providing a substantial sum that David obviously knew about. All those romantic gestures, sweet words, and promises of eternal love had been an elaborate performance designed to secure financial gain. Sarah felt a mixture of heartbreak, rage, and humiliation washing over her in waves. Tomorrow, 200. People would gather to celebrate what they believed was true love. But she now knew it was nothing more than an expensive lie. The wedding she had dreamed about since childhood had become a nightmare scenario that would soon unfold in front of everyone she cared about. Sarah spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with different scenarios and possibilities. She considered confronting David immediately, but realized he would likely deny everything and claim the message was fake. Without concrete proof of his deception, he could manipulate the situation and make her appear paranoid and unstable to their families and friends. Instead, she decided to conduct her own investigation. Using her laptop, she began searching social media platforms for any trace of Miranda. After scrolling through hundreds of profiles, she found her, Miranda Chen, a beautiful marketing executive who worked at a company just 2 blocks from David's office. Her Instagram account was set to private, but her profile picture showed a stunning woman with long dark hair and a bright smile. Sarah created a fake social media account using a stock photo and began following Miranda's public posts on other platforms. What she discovered made her stomach turn. Miranda had been posting cryptic messages about waiting for the right moment and true love conquers all obstacles. Just last week, she had shared a quote about patience being rewarded, accompanied by a photo of an expensive handbag that Sarah recognized as the same brand David had given her for her birthday. Digging deeper, Sarah found restaurant check-ins and location tags that perfectly matched David's supposed work meetings. The upscale Italian restaurant where Jessica had spotted them together appeared multiple times in Miranda's posts over the past 6 months. Sarah even found a photo of champagne glasses with the caption, "Celebrating Future Plans," posted on the same evening David claimed to be working late on an important presentation. As dawn approached, Sarah made a difficult decision. She would not cancel the wedding or run away like a victim. Instead, she would use the ceremony itself to expose David's betrayal in front of everyone who had supported their relationship. 200 guests deserved to know the truth about the man they were celebrating, and David deserved to face public consequences for his deception. Sarah began crafting a careful plan. She would go through with the wedding preparations as if nothing had happened. David needed to believe his scheme was still working perfectly. Meanwhile, she would gather additional evidence and prepare her revelation for maximum impact. The thought of facing him at breakfast and pretending everything was normal made her feel sick, but she knew it was necessary. Her phone buzzed with good morning messages from family members and friends expressing excitement about the big day. Each cheerful text felt like a knife in her heart, knowing that these people would soon witness her humiliation. But Sarah reminded herself that the humiliation belonged to David, not her. She was the victim of his elaborate fraud, and she refused to feel ashamed about his choices. When David arrived at the house that morning with coffee and pastries, Sarah forced herself to smile and act normally. He kissed her cheek and commented about how beautiful she looked even without makeup. The casual affection felt like poison now that she knew the truth behind his motivations. Every sweet word was calculated manipulation designed to secure access to her family's money. David chatted about the weather being perfect for their outdoor ceremony and expressed excitement about their honeymoon in Europe. Sarah nodded and responded, appropriately, while internally marveling at his ability to lie so convincingly. He had been living a double life for months, possibly years, and she had never suspected anything beyond occasional work-related stress. Her mother arrived early to help with final preparations, bubbling with maternal pride and joy. Sarah's heart broke watching her mother fuss over wedding details, knowing that the day would end in disaster and embarrassment for the entire family. Her parents had spent a considerable amount of money on this celebration, and they genuinely believed David was a wonderful addition to their family. Throughout the morning, Sarah received several more misdirected text messages clearly intended for David. Miranda was apparently staying at a hotel nearby and planned to watch the ceremony from a distance before meeting David later that evening. The messages revealed that they had been planning this deception for over a year, carefully studying Sarah's family finances and inheritance timeline. As Sarah sat in the bridal suite getting her hair and makeup done, surrounded by her bridesmaids and female relatives, she felt like she was preparing for battle rather than a wedding. The stylist commented on how calm and composed she appeared compared to most brides, not knowing that Sarah had moved beyond panic into cold, calculated determination. Her grandmother's pearl necklace felt different around her neck now. Instead of a symbol of family tradition and love, it represented strength and resilience. Sarah thought about the strong women in her family who had faced difficult challenges and persevered. She would honor their legacy by handling this situation with dignity and courage. The final misdirected message from Miranda arrived just as Sarah was putting on her wedding dress. It contained specific details about David's plan to access the inheritance money gradually over several months to avoid suspicion, and their intention to move to another city together once the funds were secured. Reading these details gave Sarah the final piece of evidence she needed to expose their scheme completely. The Rosewood Manor looked absolutely stunning as guests began arriving for the afternoon ceremony. White roses and baby's breath decorated every surface, creating an atmosphere of romance and elegance. Sarah watched from the bridal suite window as family members and friends filed into the garden, their faces bright with anticipation and happiness. Everyone believed they were about to witness a fairy tale wedding. David looked handsome in his black tuxedo as he greeted guests and posed for photos with the groomsmen. Sarah observed his easy smile and confident demeanor, amazed by his ability to maintain such a convincing performance. He hugged her parents warmly and thanked them for welcoming him into the family. Her father beamed with pride, having no idea that his future son-in-law was planning to steal from his daughter. Sarah's bridesmaids bustled around her, making final adjustments to her dress and veil. Jessica kept commenting on how unusually calm Sarah appeared for a bride on her wedding day. Most women were nervous wrecks by this point, but Sarah seemed almost eerily composed. If only Jessica knew that Sarah had spent the night planning revenge instead of dreaming about married life. The wedding coordinator knocked on the door to announce that it was time for the ceremony to begin. Sarah took a deep breath and looked at herself in the full-length mirror one last time. The woman staring back at her looked like a traditional bride, but she felt like a warrior preparing for battle. The white dress now seemed like armor, rather than a symbol of purity and new beginnings. As the music began and guests rose from their seats, Sarah made her way down the aisle with her father. She could see David waiting at the altar with what appeared to be genuine emotion in his eyes. For a moment, she almost doubted her decision to expose him publicly. But then she remembered Miranda's messages and the elaborate deception that had been planned for months. David deserved whatever. Humiliation was coming his way. The ceremony proceeded normally through the opening remarks and traditional readings. Sarah's cousin sang a beautiful song about eternal love that now felt bitterly ironic. The minister spoke about trust, commitment, and building a life together based on honesty and mutual respect. Sarah wondered if David felt any guilt listening to these words, knowing they meant nothing to him. When they reached the exchange of vows, David went first. He spoke eloquently about finding his soulmate and promised to love Sarah through all of life's challenges. His voice trembled with apparent emotion as he described their future together and the family they would build. Several guests dabbed at their eyes with tissues, moved by his heartfelt words. Sarah felt sick knowing that every word was a calculated lie. Then it was Sarah's turn. She had spent hours crafting her response, and this was the moment she had been preparing for all day. Instead of reading the romantic vows she had originally written, Sarah pulled out her phone and began reading Miranda's text messages aloud to the stunned congregation. The garden fell completely silent as Sarah's clear voice carried across the assembled guests. She read about David's plan to access her inheritance money, his affair with Miranda, and their intention to disappear together once the funds were secured. With each sentence, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as people began to understand what they were hearing. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, panic, and finally desperate calculation as he tried to figure out how to respond. He attempted to interrupt Sarah several times, claiming the messages were fake or taken out of context, but she continued reading methodically until she had shared every damning detail of his deception. The wedding guests sat in shocked silence, many still processing what they had just witnessed. Sarah's mother covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Her father's expression transformed from joy to fury as he realized how thoroughly David had manipulated their entire family. The groomsmen looked uncomfortable and confused, unsure whether they should support David or distance themselves from the situation. Sarah then addressed the congregation directly, explaining how she had discovered David's true intentions and decided that everyone deserved to know the truth before celebrating what they believed was a love story. She thanked the guests for their support over the years and apologized for the shocking turn of events, but emphasized that they needed to understand the reality of the situation. David finally found his voice and began protesting his innocence, claiming that Sarah had misunderstood everything and that he truly loved her. He insisted that Miranda was just a business associate and that the messages had been taken completely out of context. His desperate explanation sounded hollow and unconvincing in light of the specific details Sarah had just revealed. The minister, clearly out of his depth in this unprecedented situation, asked if the couple wanted to pause the ceremony to discuss things privately. Sarah calmly responded that there was nothing left to discuss, as she would never marry someone who had been planning to defraud her from the beginning of their relationship. Several guests began pulling out their phones to record the confrontation, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. David noticed the cameras and became even more agitated, demanding that people stop filming his personal business. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond his control, and his carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. David's composure completely shattered as he realized his carefully planned scheme was falling apart in front of 200 witnesses. He began shouting at Sarah, accusing her of being paranoid and jealous, claiming she had invaded his privacy and misinterpreted innocent business communications. His angry outburst only served to confirm everyone's growing suspicions about his true character. Sarah remained remarkably calm throughout David's emotional breakdown. She pulled out her laptop, which she had hidden behind the altar earlier, and connected it to the venue's sound system. On the large screen typically used for displaying wedding photos, she began showing evidence of David and Miranda's affair that she had gathered throughout the night and morning. The screen displayed social media posts, restaurant check-ins, and photos that clearly showed David and Miranda together during times when he claimed to be working late or attending business meetings. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Guests watched in stunned silence as months of deception were revealed through time-stamped posts and location data that contradicted David's explanations. One particularly damaging piece of evidence was a photo Miranda had posted 3 weeks earlier showing her wearing the expensive bracelet that David had supposedly bought for Sarah as an early wedding gift. Sarah had never received the bracelet, and now everyone could see that it had actually been given to his mistress instead. The cruel irony of the situation was not lost on the assembled guests. David's best man, his brother Michael, stepped forward and demanded to know if the accusations were true. The brothers had always been close, and Michael looked genuinely shocked and hurt by the revelations. David's inability to provide a convincing explanation to his own brother spoke volumes about the validity of Sarah's evidence. Sarah's father stood up from his seat in the front row, his face red with anger. He had welcomed David into their family, and had even offered him a position at the family business after the honeymoon. The betrayal felt personal, and he demanded that David leave the property immediately before he called the police. Other male relatives and family friends began moving toward the altar, making it clear that David was no longer welcome. The wedding photographer continued documenting everything, later explaining that she had never witnessed anything like this in 15 years of shooting weddings. The images captured the raw emotions on everyone's faces: shock, anger, disappointment, and in Sarah's case, a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness for what she had thought was real love. Miranda, who had apparently been watching from a distance as planned, suddenly appeared at the edge of the garden. She seemed unaware that her messages had been discovered and was confused by the chaos surrounding what should have been a joyful ceremony. When she realized what was happening, she turned to flee, but several guests recognized her from the photos. Sarah had displayed and blocked her path. Sarah addressed Miranda directly, asking her to confirm the details of their plan to defraud her family. Faced with overwhelming evidence and a hostile crowd, Miranda broke down and admitted to the affair. She claimed that David had told her Sarah's family was wealthy, but that the marriage was essentially a business arrangement that Sarah had agreed to for social status. This lie was quickly exposed when Sarah's friends confirmed that she had been deeply in love and had no knowledge of any financial arrangements. The revelation that David had been lying to both women about the nature of their relationships added another layer of complexity to the situation. Miranda appeared genuinely shocked to learn that Sarah believed she was marrying for love, while Sarah realized that even David's mistress had been partially manipulated and deceived. David made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation by claiming that he had genuine feelings for Sarah and that his relationship with Miranda was purely physical. He begged Sarah to forgive him and suggested they could work through their problems in counseling. His plea fell on deaf ears as guests began voicing their disgust and disappointment with his behavior. The minister, clearly overwhelmed by the unprecedented situation, officially declared that the ceremony could not continue under these circumstances. He had never encountered anything like this in his decades of performing weddings and was unsure of the proper protocol for handling such a dramatic revelation of fraud and infidelity. Sarah's mother finally found her voice and approached the altar to embrace her daughter. Through tears, she told Sarah how proud she was of her courage in exposing the truth rather than entering into a fraudulent marriage. The emotional moment between mother and daughter provided a stark contrast to the chaos and anger surrounding David's desperate attempts to justify his actions. Security personnel arrived at the venue, having been called by the wedding coordinator, who was concerned about the increasingly hostile atmosphere. David and Miranda were escorted off the property while guests remained in the garden, processing what they had just witnessed and offering support to Sarah and her family. Sarah stood at the altar in her wedding dress, surrounded by family and friends who had come to celebrate what they thought would be the happiest day of her life. Instead, they had witnessed her transformation from a trusting bride into a woman who refused to be victimized by someone who claimed to love her. After David and Miranda were removed from the property, an unusual transformation began to take place among the wedding guests. Instead of leaving in awkward silence, people started gathering around Sarah to offer support and express their admiration for her courage. What had started as a traditional wedding was evolving into something entirely different, a celebration of truth and female empowerment. Sarah's cousin Emma, who worked as a lawyer, approached her with concerns about potential legal implications of David's actions. The attempt to defraud Sarah through marriage could constitute criminal behavior, and Emma offered to help pursue legal action if Sarah was interested. The evidence Sarah had gathered would be crucial in building a case against David for attempted fraud and breach of trust. The wedding vendors, initially confused about how to handle the unprecedented situation, began adapting to the new reality. The caterers had prepared an elaborate reception dinner for 200 people, and the venue coordinator suggested transforming the event into a celebration of Sarah's independence and new beginning. The DJ offered to change the playlist from romantic wedding songs to empowering anthems about strength and resilience. Sarah's grandmother, now 92 years old, made her way to the front of the gathering with the help of her walker. In a voice that carried surprising strength, she told everyone about surviving the Great Depression and World War II, emphasizing that women had always been stronger than society gave them credit for. She praised Sarah for refusing to be a victim and for choosing truth over comfortable lies. The transformation of the wedding reception into what guests later called a freedom party became a memorable event in its own right. People shared stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult circumstances. Sarah's college roommate talked about leaving an abusive relationship, while her aunt discussed rebuilding her life after discovering her husband's gambling addiction had destroyed their finances. Social media began buzzing with videos and photos from the event, with many people praising Sarah's handling of the situation. The hashtag #WeddingTruth started trending as people shared their own stories of discovering deception in relationships. Sarah became an unexpected symbol of empowerment for women who had experienced similar betrayals but hadn't found the courage to speak up. Local news stations picked up the story after guests posted videos online, and reporters began arriving at the venue requesting interviews. Sarah initially declined to speak with the media, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. However, after consulting with her family and friends, she decided to share her story to help other women recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation in relationships. The legal consequences for David began mounting quickly. Sarah's cousin Emma discovered that David had been researching her family's financial situation extensively, including attempting to access private banking information through his connections in the financial industry. This elevated his actions, from simple fraud to more serious charges involving identity theft and financial stalking. Miranda, meanwhile, had contacted Sarah through a mutual acquaintance to apologize and offer additional information about David's deceptive practices. She revealed that David had used similar tactics with at least 2 other women in the past, always targeting women from wealthy families and building elaborate romantic relationships designed to provide access to money and resources. The revelation that Sarah was not David's first victim prompted Emma to contact the other women Miranda had mentioned. Both confirmed similar experiences. Long courtships filled with romantic gestures, followed by increasing interest in their family finances and inheritance situations. One woman had actually married David briefly before discovering his deception and obtaining an annulment. Sarah realized that exposing David publicly had potentially saved other women from falling victim to his schemes. The wedding venue coordinator mentioned that David had inquired about booking the same location for another ceremony just 6 months in the future, suggesting he was already planning his next fraudulent marriage while still engaged to Sarah. Thus, financial investigation revealed that David had been living well beyond his legitimate income for several years, funding his expensive lifestyle through a series of deceptive relationships with wealthy women. His designer clothes, luxury car, and upscale apartment were all financed by money obtained through manipulation and fraud rather than his stated salary as a financial advisor. As the evening progressed, the transformed wedding reception became a powerful celebration of female solidarity and resilience. Women who had never met before were sharing personal stories and offering support to one another. Sarah's decision to expose David's deception had created an unexpected community of people committed to helping others avoid similar situations. The event raised awareness about financial manipulation in relationships, a form of abuse that often goes unrecognized because it is disguised as romance and courtship. Several domestic violence organizations reached out to Sarah the following day, asking her to share her experience to help educate women about the warning signs of financially motivated relationships. Sarah's parents, initially devastated by the Public humiliation and financial loss associated with the canceled wedding began to see the positive impact their daughter's courage was having on other people. Her father admitted that he had been impressed by David's business knowledge and financial success, never suspecting that it was all built on deception and manipulation. 6 months after the wedding that became a symbol of empowerment rather than betrayal, Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The story of her courage had inspired thousands of women around the world, and she had become an advocate for financial literacy and relationship awareness. Speaking engagements at universities and women's organizations kept her busy while she pursued legal action against David. The criminal case against David Richardson moved forward steadily with overwhelming evidence. Emma's legal team had built a comprehensive case documenting his pattern of targeting wealthy women through elaborate romantic deceptions. 3 additional victims had come forward after seeing Sarah's story in the media, providing testimony about similar schemes David had orchestrated over a 5-year period. David's financial advisor license was revoked when the state regulatory board discovered he had been using his professional access to research potential victims' family finances. The firm where he worked terminated his employment and cooperated fully with the investigation, revealing that several client complaints about inappropriate personal questions had been filed against him over the years. Miranda Chen had become an unexpected ally in the legal proceedings against David. She testified about the elaborate lies he had told her about Sarah and other women, revealing the sophisticated psychological manipulation tactics he used to control multiple relationships. Simultaneously, her cooperation helped prosecutors understand the full scope of David's criminal enterprise. The financial investigation uncovered that David had stolen over $200,000 from various women through his romantic deceptions. Some victims had given him money directly for supposed business investments that never existed, while others had been manipulated into paying for expensive trips and gifts that he then shared with other women in his network of deception. Sarah used her newfound platform to launch a nonprofit organization called Truth Before Trust that educated women about financial manipulation in relationships. The organization provided resources for recognizing warning signs, conducting background checks on romantic partners, and protecting personal financial information during courtship. The response from women seeking help was overwhelming. The legal proceedings revealed disturbing details about David's methods. He had maintained detailed files on each woman he targeted, including information about their families, finances, career prospects, and emotional vulnerabilities. His apartment contained notebooks with psychological profiles and manipulation strategies specifically designed for each victim. Sarah's grandmother's pearl necklace, which she had worn during the confrontation, became a symbol of strength that she wore to every speaking engagement. She often told audiences that the necklace reminded her that wisdom and courage were inherited traits that could help women protect themselves and others from predators like David. The venue coordinator at Rosewood Manor reported that several couples had specifically requested to book the location after hearing about Sarah's story. They wanted their weddings to take place at the site where a woman had chosen truth over comfortable deception. The venue began offering truth and trust ceremonies for couples committed to complete honesty in their relationships. Jessica, Sarah's best friend, who had first spotted David with Miranda, became co-director of the Truth Before Trust organization. She developed educational programs teaching women how to investigate their partners' backgrounds and recognize red flags that might indicate financial manipulation or other forms of deception. The media attention surrounding the case led to a documentary film about romance fraud that featured Sarah's story prominently. The film won several awards and was used by law enforcement agencies to train officers about investigating financial crimes disguised as romantic relationships. Sarah consulted on the script to ensure accuracy and educational value. David was ultimately sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims. During the sentencing hearing, Sarah chose to address the court directly. She spoke about the importance of holding financial predators accountable and protecting other women from similar exploitation. Her victim impact statement was widely quoted in news coverage of the case. A year after the canceled wedding, Sarah met James Mitchell at a conference on financial crime prevention. He was a federal investigator specializing in romance fraud cases, and they connected over their shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people from manipulation. Their relationship developed slowly and transparently, with complete openness about backgrounds, finances, and intentions. Sarah's parents, who had initially been devastated by the public exposure of David's deception, became proud advocates for their daughter's work. Her father joined the board of Truth Before Trust and used his business connections to fund educational programs. Her mother became a volunteer counselor helping women who had experienced similar betrayals. The wedding dress that Sarah had worn during her confrontation with David was donated to a museum exhibit about women's empowerment movements. The display included the text messages that had exposed David's scheme and information about how the case had led to increased awareness of romance fraud among law enforcement and victim advocacy organizations. 2 years later, Sarah and James held their own wedding ceremony at a small chapel surrounded by family and close friends. The intimate celebration focused on genuine love, trust, and shared values, rather than elaborate displays of wealth or status. Sarah wore her grandmother's pearl necklace and carried a bouquet that included flowers from the original wedding venue, where she had chosen courage over comfort. The organization Sarah founded continued growing and expanding its reach, helping thousands of women avoid financial manipulation and romantic fraud. Her story became a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept anything less than complete honesty and respect in a relationship.